What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first pre-recorded review from SDGC. Tonight, we are going to be talking about Destiny 2 Forsaken. It is the first major expansion for Destiny 2 that came out last year. Up front, just before we delve into it, we were given a code from Activision for reviewing the game. It was a single code. The rest of the group has purchased it individually. So right off the top, Justin, I want to hand it to you. This game was originally pitched to people as the death of Cade 6, right?
Yes. That whole thing was very interesting because it really seemed like a direct response to some of the criticisms that the community has had with Destiny's story and lore stuff, where it's been always kind of like everything kind of gets wrapped up like the end nicely, and everything goes back to where it was before at the end of each story arc. Like a big threat comes, it gets defeated, everything goes back to normal. The death of Cade 6 and it being a full on death, like his ghost gets destroyed, he is donezo, was kind of adds that permanent element to the game that I think people were really lacking. Cade was a popular character, so people actually had some actual emotional investment in the story for once. And Cade was also central to the criticism that things were getting a bit too jokey in Destiny 2. I think in Destiny 1 people criticized it for being overly serious, which was fair, but I think a lot of that comes more from just the sheer lack of context to whatever you were doing, versus it just people were just talking, seriously about things that no one understood, and you had to read the grimoire after the fact to even get any kind of semblance of understanding of what it was.
Even the tone in the tower has changed now, Justin. At the end of the vanilla Destiny 2 campaign, when you defeat Gaul and you get access to the tower, there's this this hopeful, uplifting music, and even after you finish the campaign of Forsaken, it's just somber. It's somber and dark, and there's just this weight in the air that hasn't been there before. Yeah, and that was also kind of part of it too, where Destiny 2 was set up as the city's getting destroyed, and then everything gets rebuilt and goes back to triumphant and fine at the end of it, too. Whereas Cade 6 being gone has changed things. Plus, it also allowed Zavala and Ikora to kind of be a little bit different from how they usually are. Ikora gets really heated, and she's the one that's usually sparring with Cade and stuff. So I think that stuff was kind of good for fleshing out the Vanguard and just kind of giving us a sense of what we were fighting for. Kind of, I think making it feel starting off as kind of a smaller scale thing instead of just here comes a god, we need to kill the god, which is as cool as that stuff is. I think was something that the Destiny universe really needed.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It is a much tighter experience because of that change. One of the really kind of strange things about Destiny for me, since its release in 2014, the original, was this idea of Guardians being a group of people banded together to stop bad things from happening in the universe. But the gameplay, largely to me, always felt like a single player experience, or at most you and two friends. So this storyline being this really tight insular thing, and we won't go deep into spoilers, but the whole thing from the get up is if you want to go avenge Cade 6, you don't have the blessing from people in the tower.
It creates a weird dichotomy between Zavala and Ikora. I had to tell a brain fart on her name. But it really hasn't been there before. It's a new kind of conflict between between characters, and without giving any spoilers away, I think there's some really interesting implications for the interactions between those two characters going forward.
Absolutely, they've introduced some political intrigue between the two characters in the tower, as light as it might be. But yeah, it feels like an intimate, lone wolf experience, even if you are with friends when you play it. And that darker tone that they kind of flirted with in the first game is definitely present in Forsaken, right?
Absolutely.
And one other thing that I think is really cool, I'm not going to get too deep into, like, spoilers and stuff, but, Aldrin is made out to be, the big villain of this. He's the one that, takes the Ace of Spades from Cade and everything. And I think that's also kind of a cool throwback to the first Destiny story trailer, the one that was made before they rebooted the whole campaign, showed Aldrin, like, in, like, kind of like a Western setting, holding a hand cannon at the player and saying, this is how we discuss things out here. And so, that was one of the, big space Western-y vibes, and one of the first times we actually saw a character in Destiny. So here, having him come back, brandishing this hand cannon, out in the reef, it kind of brings back that space Western tone that, like, Destiny was originally pitched with, which I think is really cool.
Right. And just a brief thing is the reef from the original game is now a new location, or really a returning location. But it's an entirely different environment. It's just on the same kind of location in space.
We've never actually been able to explore the reef before.
Right. Like, before it was just a hub, right?
Yeah, it's been a hub, and then there's, like, a couple... there's inside the Prison of Elders, and then, a couple multiplayer maps, but it has not been a patrol destination, and it finally is now, and I've been waiting, like, 4 years to finally actually wander around in the reef.
And just to keep it brief, I would say, again, without getting into spoilers, there is some really, really strong character writing in this game. Outside of the main cast and the tower, I thought even some of the villains we were fighting stood out from each other, both in quest design, but also in the way they talk and interact with the player.
The Barons actually have some character to them, a little bit of flavor to them, which is something that we generally haven't seen in Destiny villains.
And John, can you explain to people who the Barons are?
The Barons are basically leaders of the Scorn, which are a mutated, corrupted form of Fallen, and they serve Aldrin. Unquestionably, they're enthralled to Prince Aldrin. There's 12 of them. Just a few off the top of my head. There's the Machinist, the Rider, the Hangman. The Riflemen. They all have names. There are several female members of the Barons. I can't remember how many. I know the Rider's a female, which is interesting because we haven't encountered many prominent female villains in the game.
Or even really gendered enemies.
Yeah, types, at all. Yeah, we've seen there are female male hive. Omnigul was female, but to have these characters with these personalities, like they as opposed to somebody like an Omnigul who just kind of flew around and screamed at the top of her lungs and shot fireballs at the player, or Oryx, who really he was a big evil hive god, but he didn't have a ton of interaction with the party. But these guys actually will taunt you the whole fight. They'll taunt you. They'll get mad. It's not. They're not deep. They're not like deep cut character interactions, but at the same time, it infuses those battles with a flavor and a style that really is at this point we haven't really seen in Destiny before. Does that make any sense?
Oh, 100%. And I would say, again, you mentioned 12. I think it's actually 8.
Is it 8?
I think it's 8. 9.
Is it? Okay.
Oh, it's 9. Okay. So, but I would say that the fights with them are each split up, so you fight one at a time. And they are some of the best encounters.
They're so cool.
Honestly, the Scorn period, I think, are an incredibly cool new group of enemies to fight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we should move on from the story. But we're kind
of transitioning into talking about gameplay with the different enemy types and the bosses and stuff.
That's true.
Like with adding the Barons, it kind of led to a pretty cool, almost kind of a different structure change that I really really liked, because it wasn't just like, oh, I'm just doing the story missions and it's like blow through them in a couple hours and then done, like with the other campaigns. Because the Barons are adventures. They're out in the patrol space. And the encounters with the Barons feel like full story missions. Like they're not like as thin as the adventures have been previously. So like they feel more integrated into the world, but also like I got to a point where I wasn't strong enough to take on the Barons that were coming up. So like I had to go out and gear up, but like it wasn't like a huge grind, but it just felt like I had a specific reason to gear up instead of just like getting raid ready, just trying to get to level cap and stuff, and then going through the Barrens. So there was like this big several hour split between the first few story missions and then the last two,
right,
which made the whole experience feel bigger. I mean, I think there's like 5 story missions, but it feels like a much bigger campaign because of how the Barons are integrated into the game and stuff, which I thought was awesome.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and there are some other. I mean, Justin, if you could touch on it briefly, they've entirely changed in terms of gameplay how mods work in Destiny 2. Did you really notice any big? Did that really impact how you were playing the game at all, or not? Not so much.
Not yet, because I'm saving my mods for when I get closer up to like the level cap and stuff.
Sure.
However, I do want to weigh in on some of the other changes. We haven't talked about this yet, but the weapon slot system has been completely reworked.
That's right. Talk about that.
And do you want to explain it, or should I?
Yeah, sure. So previously, you could put rifles and submachine guns and pistols and a couple other more generic weapon types in your first 2 slots, and then your power weapon was typically reserved to rocket launchers, shotguns, and grenade launchers, and swords. And now they've actually moved shotguns out into the first 2 weapon slots, which I think is actually a return to form from the first game. And really, it just adds some diversity to the way you play, and as a result, shotguns feel like a much more mainstay weapon, and they don't really feel like the powerhouses that you rarely got to enjoy. I mean, I actually didn't feel like it had a huge sea change in the way I experienced the game. One other quick thing is the game does introduce a new weapon type, which are the bows, which
I'm
I
not
felt...
a fan.
You're not a fan. I thought they fit really well.
I actually fused mine right into my rifle.
Ooh, wow.
I got one. Apparently the one you get from Petra does have random rolls, and random rolls are also
thank you,
something
Bungie.
That is...
Thank you.
And I actually have to eat some crow on the random rolls. I hated them in Destiny 1. I was so glad they were gone in Destiny 2. Because I think it's because, they're named designed weapons. So, like, when you finally get one, it felt weird that it didn't perform the way everybody was talking about it. I'm like, oh, yes, I finally... Because in Destiny 1, I kept, like, getting weapons people were talking about and saying how awesome they were. And then I got one that had shit rolls and felt like crap to use. However, how Bungie has approached it with this game is really cool. And I'm not quoting anybody from Bungie. I'm just, speaking in my observation of the weapons I've gotten. I could be wrong, but it seems like the perk pools for each weapon that are random have been more curated to complement that weapon well. So you're not getting perks that are just like completely useless like you would in Destiny 1. And I've had some that have really, really good synergy with each other and with the weapon itself. So I actually have liked that change a lot, and I did not think I was going to. I was very, very bummed out that it was coming back, but I'm definitely eating crow on that. I think it was a positive change for the game with how Bungie has approached it, and I think it seems like they took complaints of people like me into account with how they, assigned what perks could be on which weapons.
Right. It is random, but maybe the pool from which they're pulling from is a little bit less wide. And as a result, maybe a little bit less devastating at times.
Yeah.
I mean, so unless anybody has anything else, I kind of want to talk about Gambit.
I actually don't have much to say on Gambit. I really haven't played much of it.
Okay, Justin, how much Gambit have you played, buddy?
Not too much. I have played. I have played a few rounds of it. It's cool. I like it.
Yeah.
It's it's a neat, like, that's kind of one, it's a mode that I think Destiny has really needed. Because there is kind of this big divide between primarily PvE players and primarily PvP players in Destiny. Right. And Gambit is finally a mode where they can play together, and both sets can contribute, and I think that's really, really cool. Right. And just the way it works is fun. How about we probably should let Zach. How about you take it and explain, the game mode if somebody's listening and doesn't know.
Sure. So Gambit is the brand new mode. It really doesn't have anything else like it in the market in terms of co-op meets PvP style. But basically, 2 teams of 4 face off against each other. But instead of hunting each other, you're largely focusing on a random enemy type, whether that be Taken or Forsaken or Fallen. It's all decided at the beginning, and whoever you fight is the same enemy type that the other team is fighting. And as you fight and take down enemies, they will drop basically these power motes. And as you collect power motes, you collect them and turn them into a bank that's spawned onto your level. And again, you're in the same play space, but you cannot see the other team, and you're facing different enemies. So it's 2 instances of the same fights. And essentially, at certain points, portals will open up based on your team's actions or the other team's actions, and one player on your team could jump into a portal and end up in the other instance where they could cause havoc and slow down the other team's progress. Ultimately, each team is trying to get to 75 motes. Once you have 75 motes, a boss spawns. Whoever kills that final boss wins the round. So it's kind of like a heist PvP game.
That sounds really
because also the way you because saving the motes can give different things. So
blockers.
Blockers. So basically, at different, I think it's 5, 10, 15. I know 15 is the max. It will spawn a different size blocker when you bank them on the other team's bank.
Right, so it prevents them from turning stuff in. And again, if somebody else is trying the same strategy, but you block them, you could potentially give yourself a huge advantage to hit that 75 cap before they do.
Yeah, and when the Primarch, which is the Primeval, which is the boss character, ends, the portal is open quite a bit during that fight. And if anybody on your team dies, the Primeval heals a bit. So, like, going into the other side while they're fighting the boss, you could, take out some of their players, heal their boss. However, your team's down 1 for fighting the boss. So, there's a whole lot of really cool risk-reward in there, and, like, ways that you could have different roles on team for somebody who could be the invader and stuff. It's a really neat mode. I haven't played anything like it before, and it works really well for Destiny.
Right, and, like, it almost feels like co-op meets controlled griefing.
Yeah.
In that, yes, you control the other team, but, like, it's going to take a lot of organization to be really, really effective. And this is a mode where I haven't had the opportunity to play with friends because we're all on different platforms here, Justin and John on PS4 and I'm on Xbox. It seems like a mode where if you had a group of 4 people who are all communicating well, you could absolutely dominate in the mode. It is by far some of the most intense and exhilarating any type of PvP in Destiny. And one of my favorite things that I think is just goofy is in between rounds, they put you in a room with a glass wall between you and the other team, and people taunt each other with emotes. It's a great opportunity for trash talking. It's just really, really a great way to add something that's a little bit of flavor, but somewhere between Strikes and the Crucible. It's a great addition.
It's one of the most creative things that they've added in a while too.
100%. Now, I do think
it has a distinct flavor to it, and like it's also not the sort of thing that like you can figure out like a meta or best strategy for instantly because it's a new mode.
Right, but I will say that this will be a mode that lives or dies on the variety that Bungie can maintain in terms of environments and enemy types. We know that the annual pass, which is a new addition to the Destiny experience, is going to be adding some new flavors. But if that's not frequent enough, this could eventually become a mode where you're like, oh great, it's the same environment and the same enemy type, and it'll become fatiguing. But I mean, as of right now, 5 days in, it's a breath of fresh air, and it's a really great way to warm up before going into some serious matchmaking. I'm a big fan.
I think Yeah, I like it a lot too. I want to play it more. I haven't had enough time to really put into the mode, but
Sure.
I want to get a group together and really get into it because I'm not particularly good at Crucible. I like the PvE stuff a lot. I think Gambit could be a really cool mode to sink my teeth into.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we kind of start wrapping up, gang, I kind of want to talk about our previous experience briefly with Destiny and Destiny 2 and kind of the expansions and kind of think about how does Forsaken in terms of quality more so than quantity kind of compare. How do you feel compared to how if for those of you who've played Taken King or Rise of Iron, how does this feel?
So I'll jump on that one. So clearly this is doing the intent behind this is to kind of revamp and reinvent the game for Destiny 2 the same way Taken King did for vanilla Destiny. And I think on the face of it, not even having seen things like the Dreaming City yet, on the face of it, I think it does a phenomenal job of doing that. The game feels different to play. It feels better to play. There is now I would say that, and again, I have not seen the Dreaming City, but I know what's coming. There is more content in the Forsaken expansion than Curse of Osiris and Warmind combined.
Easily,
if not triple. There is a wealth of stuff to do. The grind is back, and some people, when you say the word grind, it's like a bad word, but like if you play Destiny, then you love the grind. That's part of the reason you're playing Destiny is for that grind, doing your bounties, doing your weeklies, trying to get that power level up. I think I love everything about it. I love even the Crucible feels faster, better to play. This feels like signature Bungie again. It feels like Bungie back at the top of their game. It feels like I don't know. It feels like they got the swagger back, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
I guess the only question in my mind is will this be enough to bring lapsed players back into the fold? And I think it will.
I think that it's before I go, Justin, talk a little bit about it. How do you feel?
I'm not going to compare it directly to Taken King and Rise of Iron because I've spent a lot of time with the end games for those, right. And I haven't yet, and that's kind of like the big question mark for every kind of piece of Destiny content. However, the story campaign alone, I think it is the best single story, the best story content that has been released for Destiny so far by a wide margin. And like what John said, where it feels like classic Bungie, like Forsaken in tone, story, lore, and even just overall design and game feel is what I thought Destiny was going to be at the beginning.
Yep.
And so it's really exciting to see that finally realized, and it makes me extremely excited for the future of Destiny. I mean, I was never one of the people that was particularly down on Destiny 2. I know it got plenty of complaints, but I think a lot of those criticisms have been taken into account intelligently. I think Bungie has finally figured out how to respond to community criticisms in a way that doesn't alienate players and gets them really excited for the future, which is something that they have struggled with in the past. And yeah, it just really seems like this is the point where if they can continue releasing content that's this level of quality.
Justin, if they can deliver on the concept or the promise of an evolving Dreaming City, then holy shit.
Yeah, like that could be huge. And I think that's something we're going to need to talk about in the future because that's going to be a new thing for Destiny, and if it pans out, it's going to be a big deal. But yeah, I very positive on Forsaken.
But what I will say is it feels like an evolving piece of content, but it feels substantial in that oftentimes at the end of Rise of Iron or even Taken King, while it's an enjoyable experience, 3 or 4 days later, I kind of like, that was it? I hit it? I've hit this level cap? Listen, this story content is far and away the strongest bit of content.
It's actually fascinating.
So it's
a really well written, interesting, and Spider.
And they execute and presumably they've executed on it in 12 months. Presumably that this wasn't going on behind the scenes beforehand, which is incredible because again, the bosses you face in this are some of the most varied and challenging in the whole thing. Justin, you're back. We are talking about just in terms of people who come to this for the week of content in terms of story. Easily the best thing out there for Destiny, in my opinion.
Easily, and I think that is also really smart. And I think the way they're approaching the annual pass is very smart. I mean, we still have to see how that pans out.
Right. And that's everything, right?
I think there's definitely a contingent of people that just like playing through the story campaigns when they come out, and then maybe they gear up for the raid, and that's kind of it. And then they don't. Like playing the little expansions in between, which is fine. And I think now people can actually have that story campaign to look forward to if they focus on that and build it like they have with Forsaken.
Right.
And then also, the annual pass content is much more geared towards endgame, long-term, grind-loving players.
Right.
Which is something that they really need to do. And I think if they pull off the plan that they have, it's going to be awesome for the future of Destiny.
Yep. Annual pass, for me, is a pretty big question mark.
Yes.
And also, I just want to add, the annual pass in terms of monetization is pretty steep. The asking price for Forsaken as an expansion pack is around $40, but if you get it with the annual pass, it's at $60 or $80 in US.
It is $70.
$70, which is pretty steep. So in terms of them actually delivering on that, we'll see. But man, it is hard to not feel excited, or at the very least cautiously excited after the week I've had with
this.
Forsaken,
This feels like Bungie has found their footing, found their confidence again.
Yep.
It feels like they figured it out. This is the tone that Destiny should have.
Honest to God, like Justin, this right here feels like what Destiny should have been from the beginning, and but
it's taken a while.
It's taken a while, but we're here now.
We've said that. People have said that quite a few times in the past with Destiny, but I think this time it is like Forsaken feels like a complete relaunch of Destiny, not just Destiny 2. But like, it really feels like
you know what's interesting, Justin, and
this feels like a big moment.
So I think this is the best way to put it, and this will be my final point. I saw somebody on Twitter, and it struck me. They said, "Wow, I can't believe we're playing Destiny 3."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it does feel like that leap, doesn't it?
This feels like a leap between games, not just an expansion. To be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah. Well, and just in terms of the way they're structuring it and frankly monetizing it, but also their roadmap on how they plan on executing content rather than doing 2 middle experiences throughout the year that are 2 hours long. How can they prolong that experience and execute something for 12 months?
I am very excited to see what the future holds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I also want to, before we get going, I forgot to mention this when we were talking about like some of the gameplay changes, but the whole new Triumph system is really cool.
Really cool, yeah.
And I think, like, so basically what they have added is categorized just little challenges, basically, that add up to a total score. It's actually taken into account stuff that you've done all the way through Destiny 2. So there's stuff even from, vanilla and the previous 2 expansions, as well as a way of just looking at all the items that you've gotten, not just like exotics. Like, there is full... there's like a full gallery of items that you can look through. It's really, really cool. And I think that's going to be awesome for long-term players because, I mean, even if they're not looking for particular gear, it can give them, some kind of secondary goal to work for. Like, oh, I want to work on getting this Triumphs. And there's actually physical rewards now for doing it. I actually have earned the soundtrack for Forsaken from my Triumph score, which is really neat. They're kind of building on the T-shirts that they were doing with the like moments of triumph and everything.
Right.
And,
the Triumph almost feels like, so you've hit a level cap and you've hit a light level cap, but there's still more to work towards. And like I feel like that kind of incentivized grind is a way to reward players who've already pushed the game to its limits in terms of progression.
And on top of that, finally, there is a lore tab, and you can read the lore in-game without having to go to a separate app or having it be forgotten entirely like it was early on in Destiny 2. I'm personally a big fan of the Destiny lore, and I'm so glad that people are finally going to be able to read it. And I think also, I won't go into particular spoilers, but there's some really cool lore stuff in Forsaken, and I'm really excited to see where that goes, because it feels like they're finally starting to unify some of these disparate parts of the lore, bring them into the story campaigns in the game, as well as making the lore accessible to all players, which is a very positive move.
Absolutely. All right, with that, guys, I think that is going to do it for our Destiny 2 talk. Now, as we've mentioned throughout, we do plan on revisiting this from time to time as more content comes out, whether that be a raid or some of the annual pass content. So please keep up with us. Remember, we try to go live every Thursday. Keep an eye on our Twitter feed at official SDGC. Thanks so much, guys, and have a great week. Thanks, Justin and John.
No problem.